Hey guys, I hope you enjoy this week's sermon. If you're interested in getting connected here more at the sanctuary, you can visit us at our website at tscwest.org, or you can check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of the things. I hope you enjoy this message.
Judges chapter 11. We're going to start in verse 1. We're going to read 11 verses, and then we're going to jump to verse 29. 11:1. Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. "You are not going to get any inheritance in our family," they said, "because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a gang of scoundrels gathered around him and followed him. Sometime later, when the Ammonites were fighting against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. "Come," they said, "be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites." Jephthah said to them, "Didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble?" The elders of Gilead said to him, "Nevertheless, we are turning to you now. Come with us to fight the Ammonites, and you will be head over all of us who live in Gilead." Jephthah answered, "Suppose you take me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me. Will I really be your head?" The elders of Gilead replied, "The Lord is our witness. We will certainly do as you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And he repeated all his words before the Lord in Mizpah. And jump to verse 29. Verse 29 says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah. He crossed Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, 'If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering.' Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel-Keramim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of timbrels? She was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, 'Oh no, my daughter! You have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break.' 'My father,' she replied, 'you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised, now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request,' she said. 'Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry.' 'You may go,' he said. And he let her go for 2 months. She and her friends went into the hills and wept because she would never marry. After the 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed, and she was a virgin. From this comes the Israelite tradition that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Y'all welcome Mr. Tyler Hill.
Hey, everybody. In the Hill household, just real quick before we jump into this passage, soccer is a really big deal. So I'll give you a little insight into our day yesterday. I wake up at about 4:30 to watch soccer in London on TV, cheer for my team. Then my son played at 8 o'clock. Then we had soccer practice after his game after that, because he wanted to practice after the game. And then we came home, took a nap, and then I went to the Switchbacks game last night, and so my voice is barely holding on. Our great custodial captain here, Stephen. Stephen, why don't you wave to everybody? This is Stephen. He keeps the building safe and clean. He's a real hero here. He's the coolest person here, and he said I sound cool today, so I feel much better about myself. So here we go, pray. But seriously, pray my voice holds up, because a couple hours ago I couldn't talk at all. So here we are. When we hear stories like this, whether it's in real life, whether it's in our own story, it's easy to rush to judgment. We see the worst moments, we see the big failure, the destructive choice someone makes, and we think, how could they? What a mess, what an awful person. We're quick, whether we like to admit it or not, we're quick to define other people by their worst moments. To read the story of Jephthah very easily can be that. And if we're honest, we do the same thing with ourselves. We fixate on the climax of our failures, the affair, the relapse, the thing that we shouldn't have done, the screaming match, the day we walked away from someone we loved. And we begin to define ourselves by that moment, by the thing that we are ashamed of. We could all be tempted to view Jephthah in this same way. We see the story where he ends up killing his daughter, and we think, what an awful dude. How could anyone make a vow like that? How could a father sacrifice his own daughter? It feels reckless. It feels cruel. It feels unthinkable. I would never do something like that, we think. And the reality is, I think we're a lot more like Jephthah than we'd like to think. You see, if we simply focus on the most dramatic part of the story, we miss the story underneath. And like every human story, there is always a story underneath. So I don't think this story is as much of a cautionary tale as it is a mirror for all of us. We're invited to see ourselves in the story of Jephthah. So the question this story, I believe, begs us to ask is, what narrative am I living my life from? What is really driving the choices we make? I want you to think about that all morning. What is really driving the choices we make? So let's go comb through this story a little bit. Jephthah shared the same father as his brothers, but Jephthah's mom was a prostitute. So he had a different mom than the rest of his brothers. From the very beginning, Jephthah's life was marked by difference, by separation. He was different. There was something that happened to his story that was outside of his control. This is what we would call a trauma. Something happened to him that was not his choice and out of his control that shaped a core part of his identity. Does that make sense? The story beneath the story begins here. He would have felt that he was born by the mistake of his father. He was not the same as the rest of his family, which is to say that he would have felt separate, not part of the greater community. And this was backed up by his brothers, who literally pushed him out of the family and disowned him. As a result, he spent years in exile, living as an outcast far from home. And this became Jephthah's origin story. Who he was as he was born, the family he was born into, the way he was born into it, meant that he wasn't good enough. He wasn't brotherly enough. He didn't have the right mother enough to belong. Could you imagine what this story would have done inside of him? The sting of being unwanted, the loneliness of not belonging, the ache of constantly being reminded that you don't measure up. And here's where we pause for the first time and let this story speak into our own. Because isn't this what many of us do? Some of us grew up in homes where we never felt seen. Or maybe you were the quiet one or the one who didn't quite fit the mold. And you started to believe the lie that says, who I am isn't enough. Some of you know what it's like to be pushed out, whether by family or your church or your peers. The ache of separation sits within you. It doesn't just go away someday. It sits. It becomes part of your story. Some of us carry wounds from rejection, abandonment, being constantly compared to others. And just like Jephthah, we build lives around that lie, trying to prove that we belong, that we do matter, that we are strong enough, that we are smart enough. Maybe that's why we all work more than we should be. We always feel the need to be the strong one, the one in control. Or maybe that's why we can't stand being alone with ourselves. Because then those quiet old wounds start whispering again that you're not enough. You don't belong. You have to earn it. Friends, again, this is not just Jephthah's story. This is our story too. We have wounds that begin to form our life, our opinions, our personalities, and the stories that we live, the things that we do. What did Jephthah do? He started living from his story of separation. First, we see what he did is he went out and he found some scoundrels. I love that the Bible uses that word. It feels very Star Wars. But notice, he was rejected out of his family. That was the wound. And so what did he go do? He went and kind of created one, didn't he? He went and found some other scoundrels, as it says in the text, to surround him and be his community. He went and found other insecure people that would follow him so he could feel like he belonged. Ooh. He went to the lowest common denominator to find people that would reinforce his own thoughts. He didn't find somebody that would challenge him, that would hold him accountable. He went and found scoundrels. See, oftentimes when things don't go our way, we find people that will just wallow with us, people that we can complain with, people that will match our victim vibration, instead of elevating ourselves and the community around us. What he could have done, instead of reminding himself that he didn't belong, what if he reminded himself of his true identity? I'm not what happened to me as a child. I am so much more than that. Therefore, I will build a community that reflects my God-given identity. He could have done that. Let me say that again. I'm not what happened to me as a child. Therefore, I'm going to build a community that reflects my God-given identity. But that's not what happened. Instead, his childhood wound shaped his lived experience. These were the decisions that he began to make. And this pattern, living out of wounds rather than living out of our belovedness, is what ultimately pointed him toward the tragedy we read about in this story. Again, here we must notice how living out of wounds impacts the choices we make. The story continues. Jephthah then carves out his identity as a fighter, as a warrior, a man to be reckoned with. His wounds became the fuel that drove him to prove himself. His pain led him to create a new identity. His weakness became the soil by which he tried to grow strength. If he couldn't belong by love, he would belong by force. Again, we see this in the text. He became a fighter and a warrior. Think about, again, what's happening inside of him. Because his family of origin, the stories he carries, I'm weak, I don't belong, I can't stay, everybody else forced me out. I'm gonna make sure that never happens again. I'm gonna be the strongest one in the room. I'm gonna be the smartest one in the room. I'm gonna be the richest one in the room. We come up with all of these narratives trying to force ourselves in belonging. I'll show them, he says. This character, this person that we create out of our woundedness, is what contemplatives and mystics and even psychologists for many, many years have called the false self. Everybody say false self. The false self is the identity that we construct in order to protect ourselves from pain and rejection. It's the version of ourselves that we present to the world in order to feel like we matter, like we're safe, like we belong. And here's the tricky thing, is that the false self usually doesn't look that bad. In fact, it often looks admirable. It often looks impressive. In fact, many people will look at us projecting our false self and call it holy. See, the tricky thing here is that it becomes so integrated with our personality, we can't ever really tell the difference. For some of us, the false self says, I know the exact right theology. I can answer every question. I never doubt anything. And if I can protect my certainty, then I'll never be exposed as fragile or unsure. In fact, I'm going to go tell everyone else why I'm right and they are wrong. I'm going to obsess over why other people are wrong. But maybe for you, the story underneath that story is that you've always been a little different. And maybe your creative thoughts were deemed as scary to others. Maybe you were criticized or dismissed for asking questions and made to feel small. So now the personality of certainty becomes your shield, and correcting others becomes the way to protect yourself from ever feeling small again. It doesn't actually have to do with the people that you don't like. It has to do with your own insecurity. Maybe for others, the false self says, I'm successful. Look at my resume. Look at my achievements, my salary. If I can keep this appearance of success, then no one will see the part of me that feels scarce and like a failure. So I'm going to act like a successful person. Maybe the story beneath the story says you grew up in a home where love and approval were conditional, where only accomplishments earned you praise. You learned that you had to perform in order to matter. So you built a version of yourself that could never fail in public. You have to look successful in your appearance, your intellect, or your bank account. Or maybe it's I'm the helper. I'm always the one serving. I'm always the one showing up. I'm always doing what's needed. If I am indispensable, then no one will ever leave me again. But the story could be, when I was a kid, no one wanted me, so I'm going to create a life where everyone needs me. Christians are really good at this. The false self looks like strength, success, and certainty, but it's rooted in fear, shame, and insecurity. Here's another very simple way of identifying if you are or are not living as the false self. I call it the if-then curse. If I get this thing, then I will be happy. If this person changes the way I want them to, then it will work out. If this person becomes president, then the world will be better. If I just had those parents, then I would be okay. If I just stay sober long enough, then God will love me. The false self is always screaming, if, then. The opposite of this is living from a place of wholeness and belovedness, knowing that you are loved and that you do belong, that you can be happy if you are living out of an abundance of God's love and provision rather than living from your wounds. And the false self always grows out of wounds. And while it may give you a temporary feeling of strength, of importance, and of power or safety, it will never lead you to wholeness. Like in the story of Jephthah, the false self always leads to more separation and tragedy. Now imagine if Jephthah had not gone out and manufactured this crummy community and false identity as a warrior. What if he took the time and looked at his wounds? He observed his story and again said, what happened to me was wrong, but it's not the core of who I am. I don't need to go make something of myself because I already am something. Maybe he was actually a great leader at his core, but he wasn't a reckless warrior. Maybe he was to be a spiritual teacher or a prophet, but instead he went the other way. Maybe you were supposed to care deeply for theology. But you don't have to be so offended by others who are different. Or maybe you are to be successful in your business or your company, but it doesn't have to be the source of your belovedness. The difference between how one story develops and another is tremendous. You have to look at the soil upon which you are planting your seeds. Are you planting the seeds in your story in a soil of belovedness and wholeness? Or are you planting your seeds in a soil of separation and badness? And this changes the entire trajectory for how your plant will grow. So for Jephthah, he started planting his story in bad soil. And the story continues. The people of Israel were being threatened, and they knew they needed a strong warrior who could help them to survive. So what did they do? They looked on Instagram, and then they found a strong warrior a few towns down named Jephthah, the very one they had pushed away a little while before. And desperate, they begged him to come back and lead them into battle. Okay? So in this moment, Jephthah has been living from this wound of separation for a really long time. He has not healed from his wounds. His identity was still wrapped up in rejection, still entangled in the need to prove himself and prove his brothers wrong. His false self was hungry to prove himself. How do we know this? He didn't just go into battle out of love for his people. Like maybe if he was just a healthy warrior, he would have said, yes, I want to help my people. But what did he do? He negotiated a power deal. Out of his insecurity of being pushed out, he struck a deal with the Israelites and said, if I win this battle, I want to ensure that I'm in charge of all of you. Do you see that power shift? He's going, you guys push me out, well, I'm going to make sure now that I'm the one in charge, baby. If you give the and so they make the deal. Jephthah starts going towards battle, and he needs this, right? Out of this wound, he needs power. He needs control. And so he makes a deal with God. He makes a vow with God. Remember that if-then curse I talked about? If you give the Ammonites into my hands, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me, I will return, when I return in triumph, will be the Lord's. If and then. This was a vow made out of his false self. Living out of the false self always looks like a desperate deal, a bargain, a vow, a way to control outcomes. And we all do this kind of bargaining, my friends, without even realizing it. If I just work hard enough, then people will notice me. If I just act like I have it all together, then no one will see my mess. If I pray enough or serve enough, if I follow all the rules, then surely I will be loved and safe. If my spouse just talked to me this way, I'd feel secure. If my pastor just made the right decisions, then I would have faith. If my friends understood me fully, then I wouldn't be lonely. We bargain with these circumstances. If I just had more money, this title, this degree, this opportunity, then everything would be okay. And even the small bargains begin to sneak in. If I post this the right way on Instagram, then people will write me. If I say the right thing, then I will be respected. If I hide this weakness, no one will reject me. All of these are modern versions of Jephthah's vow. They are attempts to control outcomes and people in order to secure blessing. And yet this story shows us that these vows from the false self always come with a cost. To ourselves, to others, and to those we love the most. And we see this heartbreak unfold for our character today. After the battle is won, Jephthah returns home in triumph. And who comes running out the door? Not a servant, not an animal, his only daughter, dancing with joy, celebrating her father's victory. His vow, born out of woundedness and the false self, destroys the very thing he loves the most. My friends, this is what happens when we live from the false self and we build a life, we make decisions, and we chase dreams and goals from our wounded places. We sever relationships, we live angry, constantly disappointed, we live reactionary, and we ultimately destroy the love that was always trying to hold us. Look how this story comes full circle. As we've explored the foundation of how Jephthah got to this place, we remember that these wounds came from the decision his father made. His father slept with a prostitute, an act that probably came out of his father's own unhealed wounds. His father's own pain and longing transferred a story of brokenness and rejection into his son. And those unhealed wounds, the unaddressed pain, those broken patterns, they didn't stay with him. What happened? They went to Jephthah. And then those unhealed wounds, that unfelt pain, it didn't just stay with Jephthah, did it? It ended up going to his daughter. Father Richard Rohr insightfully notes, if we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it, usually to those closest to us, our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, and most importantly, our vulnerable children. I'll just tell this story real quick. Like some of you guys know, I started a coffee company that was really successful. And one of my wounds that I've had, I'm riffing here, so hopefully good luck. My mom grew up really, really sick. And my dad was kind of an addict to the church. So he always was like helping people all the time, which is cool, but it was out of his wounds. Like he was always helping other people because he needed to be needed, right? And then that left me at home a lot, like not having any connection. I felt always like other people were more important. And then my mom was so sick, everybody gave her attention, so it always felt like she was the most important. And I never was given a sense of that attention. And so when I got this opportunity to create this coffee company, I didn't know it at the time, but I was creating this giant thing out of this woundedness. Mostly if I can be the most famous coffee professional in the world, which I pretty much became. I was ranked one of the top 10 baristas in the world. USA Today said the coffee company was one of the top 10 coffee shops in America. My wife and I didn't pay for a coffee for probably 4 years, no matter where we were in America. Seriously. Like people would just mail us stuff all the time. But none of it was born out of a place of abundance, out of a place of belovedness. See, behind the scenes, I was also sleeping at the coffee shop instead of at home in bed with my wife. My wife would try to talk to me about things, and I would look at her, and she'd think I'm listening, but I would look into her eyes and see the profit and loss statements of the company. I wasn't present. I missed out on the first year of my son's life pretty much. Starting this thing, building this thing out of a wound rather than of abundance. Wow. Eventually, after a lot of years of therapy and all of this, pretty much I had to get rid of it. I sold the company overnight and left. And I could have done that a little kinder to my partners and stuff, but the point is that it wasn't good. It looked good on the outside. It looked really good on the outside, but on the inside, I was suffering deeply. But here's the point, is not only was I suffering, it was hurting I was not present for my son's first year pretty much. I missed a whole year of marriage. It wasn't just me, I was wounding those I loved the most. And this is what we see in this story. Jephthah was wounding his daughter because of his unhealed wounds, which came from his father and his unhealed wounds. But my friends, we need not live from the false self. We can embark on a journey of healing and self-discovery, of transformation. We have to choose healing over harm. We can begin to transform the narratives we've inherited, which is to say we can live from a different soil. And in doing so, we break the cycle of the false self and step into the life of true belonging and purpose, the identity that God put in us from the beginning. Who did God make you to be? Not what is the story you've been told about you. So what does this look like really quick as we move through this? First, the first step, and it's the most important one, is by noticing. We have to notice. We have to become awake. We have to pay attention to the patterns of our hearts and our actions. Who are the people that trigger us? What are the things that trigger us? Where does fear just swell up inside? Where are we grabbing? Where do we feel scarcity? Where do we seek approval instead of presence? And a lot of the time, my friends, we cannot notice these things all by ourselves. Okay? We need help. I haven't been able to run lately. My knee has this issue. And no matter how much I look at my knee, I can't figure out what's going on inside of it. I had to go to a doctor and get an MRI to look at what was going on the inside. I have spent so much money on therapy, you guys, you wouldn't even know it. We have to get help and we have to notice. Spiritual directors, mentors, therapists, we have to get help noticing. And it's not out of condemnation, it's out of curiosity and beauty. Why am I acting this way? Why am I getting triggered this way? What if it was out of a pursuit of hope and wholeness, not out of shame? Not because again, you're not broken, you're not the thing. You are so much more than that. You are whole, you are beloved. God loves who you are. We got to go find it. We've been telling this other story for so long. We got to go find it. So the first step is noticing. It's awareness. And then the second step is surrender. We have to let go. We have to let go of trying to control people, circumstances. We have to let go. We have to let go of needing to fix everything. We have to let go of performance. We have to let go of control. Because when we let go of control, guess what happens? Our hands are open for the gifts that God has to give us. And so the third step is that when we notice what we're clinging to, our false self, and then we let go, love emerges. Love for God, love for ourselves, love for the world around us. Love then becomes the soil in which we grow into our true self. How do you know if you're living from the true self? As we start to wrap up, it shows up in very simple and profound ways. When you can look in the mirror and just love what you see. Not because of what you've achieved or how you appear, or because of what you've done. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying when you look in the mirror and you just see yourself as beloved. Amen. When you can look at another person and know, I don't need to control them. I don't need to protect myself from them because I'm safe in God's love. Amen. When love, not fear, begins to guide your choices and your emotions, when love, not fear, begins to guide you, your words, your thoughts, that is the true self in action. Living from the true self is rooted in our identity as beloved. As 1 John 3:1 reminds us, see what the great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. That's a beloved identity, a child of God. My son, my daughter, none of you, me, we didn't earn our identity as children. We just are children because we were born. So as we wrap up here, let's just take a deep breath together. And I want you to feel something here. That you are not defined by your mistakes, your failures, your past, or what was done to you. Those things did happen, but they are not who you are. You are defined by love. And in that love, your true self waits, always ready to emerge, waiting for you to step into it freely and fully. You don't have to seek belonging through force. That will destroy what you love most. The choice before us is to continue either to force the world around us to be the way we think it needs to be, to control out of fear and the false self, or it's to rest in the unwavering, unearned love of God, and to then live from that place. And from that place, we live freely, fully in truth. Belovedness is yours, my friend.